Hello, my name is Antonio, and this is the commentary for Cooking with Brennen Frank Strikes Again. So, this is the second episode of the Cooking with Brennen series to incorporate the character of Frank. Eighth episode of season 2 overall. But yeah, this was the second episode that had the character of Frank in it. I remember we did the Frank episode. You know, the original Frank episode was very like not planned for me. You know, the entirety of season 1 in general was like I was kind of coming up with it as we went along. But with the Frank episode, the main reason why we even did that episode was because there was this joke in one of this other video that I made called The Return of Frank, to where, you know, my character Frank, who I could explain where he comes from, but it's a whole rabbit hole. But basically, I have this character of Frank to where basically his whole personality is that his name is Frank and he's kind of a goofball. And he wears a red shirt and glasses. And we had this episode where he basically like goes to me, like, you know, Antonio, myself, and he is like, hey, I want to be in more videos. And then he has this idea, like, what if I took over the Cooking with Brennen series? And that was just supposed to be more or less a one-off joke and not really have any further like continuation. But when Brennen saw that video, he was just like, what if we did a video? Like, he literally texted me this and he was like, what if we did a video where like Brennen is like, I'm going to get revenge on you, Frank, for trying to steal my show. And then Frank is like, oh shoot. So we ended up doing that as like a very short video. And that was just literally just like for fun. Like, you know, it didn't necessarily intend on being like anything more than like another one-off joke. But then I was like, what if we actually incorporate that into a Cooking with Brennen episode? So we did the first Cooking with Brennen Frank video. And that was like one of my favorite episodes to do, just because like doing the back and forth, because normally with these videos, I'm kind of behind the camera and I'm mainly just filming Brennen and having him do stuff. But with the Frank episode, I got to have like sort of like a back and forth like banter with Brennen, which I thought was really cool. Like we did a lot of ad-libbing for that episode, which I thought was super fun, because normally I write out pretty much everything for these videos, like with scripts and all. But we got to do a lot more like impromptu dialogue with the Frank episode, just because we got to like work off of each other. And I just thought that was like super fun. So when I was first thinking of season 2, I was like, I want to do another episode with Frank. And so that was something that I like settled on fairly early on. I actually set that up in a different video called Frank's Giving, where I have Frank try to invent a holiday. And then at the very end of the video, there's like a teaser. And I don't know if like a whole lot of people caught on to this, but my intention with that was to like tease the fact that I was going to end up doing another Frank episode. So that was kind of cool. That was like another like little instance of continuity that I got to build up. But yeah, so with this episode, I was just like, we're gonna do another Frank episode, and because it happened in the latter half of the season, I had to incorporate the villain into it somehow, which I did, which I figured out a way to, obviously. But this part right here, I want to bring attention to this. This like little intro, this like little custom intro. This is the only episode of season 2 that has this like very different feeling intro than like all of the other Cooking with Brennen episodes that we do. Normally they're fairly, you know, they're the same, like, you know, like they're the same song and like presentation for all of the Cooking with Brennen episodes that we do. But this one has a very special intro. And I remember at the time when I uploaded this video, I think Brennen like commented on the video. He was like, dude, new intro. And I was just like, okay, this isn't intended to be the new intro though. Like, I mean, it was literally just for this video. And I don't know if a lot of people know what it's referencing. But it's basically, it's a recreation of the intro to a different YouTuber's show. Specifically Scott the Woz. He like, I won't go too deep into it, but basically he was airing some of his videos on TV, and he got to incorporate like a theme song, and the visuals for the theme song, I was trying to recreate that basically, and I think there's like an upload of it on YouTube. But yeah, I basically was just like, around this time, I was just like, hey, what if I recreated that intro? Because I thought it looked cool, and I was just like, what if I recreated the intro with like Cooking with Brennen graphics? So I was just like, sure, let's do it. So I ended up like, that was like right at the end when I was editing this video, I was just like, we're going to do a custom intro for this one. And so we did. And it was just kind of something for me. Like, I didn't really think a lot of people were going to know what that was or like what it was referencing. But I was just like, I just want to do it. I just think it was fun. But yeah, and this is, like, again, this is the only episode where that happens. But I kind of intended on that being the case. But yeah, anyway, back to the episode, the actual episode. Yeah, I wanted I wanted a reason for Frank to be here. And, like, it's just really weird to look back on because, like, I had a lot of ideas for the direction I wanted to take with the second season of Cooking with Brennen and, like, how I wanted it to end and all of that. But at the same time, I was still kind of figuring it out as I went along. And one element of the season that I kind of came up with as we went along was the idea that Frank was going to be kidnapped by this bad guy. Basically, like, I had the idea to where the bad guy wanted to get information about Brennen, and he was just like, okay, I need to capture someone close to Brennen to get info about him. And so he, the villain ends up seeing Frank in this episode, and it's just like, oh, okay, we got to get this guy. So that's how I ended up, like, excusing the fact, like, at least in terms of the greater story of this season, like why Frank comes back. Obviously, like, in the video, Frank explains, like, oh yeah, I'm just like, I want to be a cooking show host again or whatever. But yeah, in reality, one, I just wanted to do another Frank episode, and then two, I just wanted to, like, have a reason to have Frank show up so he could get kidnapped eventually. But yeah, this is, but the interesting thing about how I did this was that this episode, like the other two episodes or the previous two episodes, were very much like they incorporate the villain into the story of the actual episode. So, like, in the ice cream episode, the villains melt Brennan's ice cream. In the Lego episode, the villains turn Brennen and Antonio into Legos, that kind of thing. With this episode, it was very much like a Frank included episode first, and then the villain aspect was kind of more of a, like, secondary component to it. Like, and what I mean by that is, like, the villains only show up in the episode at the very beginning and the very end. Like, they are very inconsequential to the episode itself. But, obviously, like, this whole episode is intended to set up the fact that, oh, Frank is close to Brennen, so we got to capture Frank. And that's kind of, and overall, like, I just didn't have, like, a good idea for how to incorporate the villains into the story, like, in the middle of the video, like, besides just having them at the middle and the end, and then just having the implication that, like, oh, throughout the episode, they watch Brennen and Frank, and they're like, oh, okay, so Frank must be a friend to Brennen. But other than that, it's very much like the same sort of idea as the first Frank episode, to where it's literally just kind of a normal episode Cooking with Brennen, but Frank is just there. And that's kind of what I wanted to do with it. But, obviously I do, like, have the villains come in at the beginning and the end, and then at the end they establish, like, okay, Stabby's gonna go capture Frank, and that's, like, what we end up seeing. But and I just realized I didn't mention this in the commentary for the Lego episode, but that's also where Stabby is, like, established, or, like, we have, like, a little, like, post credits scene where Stabby shows up, and he, like, it's implied that, after Brennen and him had that, like, anime battle, that he's, like, shot into the sky, and then he lands right outside the villain's lair, and then he goes to, like, see the villains and become part of the team. And so we have that, like, foreshadowing, and then in this episode he's, like, introduced to be part of the team, and so that's very much, like, a component of it. But that's the thing, is, like, the villains, like, all their this episode, like, by all means, you could cut the beginning and end of it, and it would still feel like a coherent episode of Cooking with Brennen. The villains are just there to be like, we got to capture Frank. Like, that's literally what their entire role is. But I think that it's kind of good that it does that, because it very much just lets the episode just kind of, like, be funny, and not, like, you don't you don't have to have the villains like do much in the video. You can just have them show up and you establish what they're going to do. But other than that, you can just enjoy the video for what it is. And what it is a funny little joke between me and Brennan and Frank. And that's all that it really needs to do at the end of the day. That's all I really wanted it to do. If we, by all means, if we did not even have a villain component in Cooking with Brennan, I would have still done this episode, and it probably would have been pretty much the same, besides the villain parts of it. But yeah, but you know, like this, like again, this was just a really fun one to do. Like I love playing Frank alongside Brennan. I think it's super fun. I love just like how much just Brennan just despises Frank and like really just doesn't hold back on him. I just find that hilarious, and I love like playing more of a goofy character, because a lot of times with Cooking with Brennan, I'm a lot more like, I'm kind of the straight man in the videos. Like I kind of play into Brennan's antics, or I guess rather I don't. Like I kind of like I'm very like non-tolerant to Brennan's shenanigans. But with Frank, with the Frank episodes, I get to kind of be the comic relief, and Brennan kind of gets to play the straight man, which I think is really cool. Just because it's just like it just makes things different for both of us, which I think is really fun. And yeah, that's why I kept bringing back Frank, because I was just like, he's just too much of a funny, goofy character to leave alone, I guess. But yeah, and then yeah, we established that he's going to be kidnapped, and then that's where we end off. And I love having these like cliffhanger endings. Like that's another aspect of these like latter season 2 episodes that I really like, is having like all of these like, you know, oh, what's going to happen next? You know what I mean? And that was very much prevalent throughout this latter half of season 2. And yeah, but with that is going to conclude this commentary. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.